Good evening. It is the 25th episode of the Mabuku Chronicles, and tonight, where I am, it's evening, around 9 o'clock, on Thursday, August the 28th, in the year 2014 AD. And it's a bit too loud. Let's try to start again. Hello. This is welcome to the 25th episode of the Mabuku Chronicles. Yeah, it is evening here, and 9 o'clock or so on Thursday, August the 28th in the year 2014 AD. So welcome, and I hope you're having a great summer. It's about to come to an end. Labor Day weekend this weekend. College football season opens tonight, and NFL next week. And of course, Michaelmas begins in September, and lung season. And by the way, I'm uploading right now a whole series of segments, 6 of them, I think 7, on lung conditions since I did this last year. Actually did the video, but I only put up a little excerpt which I will take down and replace with the full 7 segments that I'm uploading right now. And I think I'm going to put up a kidney one too. So that will get you set for what I refer to as the long large intestine season, which is fall, which begins September the 21st and goes through to the winter solstice. Now, I did say last time, it's been quite a while. Let's see what day was the last one. June the 8th. Here we are, August the 28th. That I wouldn't be really doing anything until something really, shall I say, even the moribund Ministry of Truth wouldn't be able to cover this up or ignore it. And nothing has actually visibly happened in that regard. However, some things are, shall we say, bubbling under the surface now. Some two actually huge, what you might call events. And these were taken from Jim Willie, who actually had kind of a, by his admission, a sort of a potted, what you might call a potted hat-trick letter this month, because he became ill after he posted the first section. And the second section was just a bunch of notes and mainly ad hoc, and was relatively, by his standards, incoherent. But the first one was not, and it contains what I consider to be two really major developments taking place. And the first one is I went through the hat-trick letter, the first one this morning, and I copied and pasted the relevant excerpts that I want to highlight. The thing is with the hat-trick letter is that they're very copious. They go to 35 to 40 pages each, and there's 2 of them every month. So there's a lot of ground is covered, and as I've repeatedly said, it's really a good idea that if you haven't already subscribed to it, you do so. The Hat Trick Letter by the Golden Jackass, otherwise known as Jim Willie. So, the first one is, and this is so big, Germany has secretly hit, and I'm quoting from his report, the accelerated pedal to join the BRICS alliance. The BRICS alliance meaning Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. I said South America last time inadvertently, and but it's South Africa. And they've had some, associates join since then, since it was, first came about. And the key triggers have, in other words, what has stimulated the German government to initiate joining the BRICS alliance are the following. One, the pressure to suppress the evidence that on the Ukrainian military who downed the Malaysian airliner MH17, that's number one. The other one was a theft of German official gold account. And the third one was the constant so-called national security agencies spying on the German government, including Angela Merkel, the president. So, 3 strikes and out. The Germans are hastening their flip eastward, and Germany will put its weight behind the construction of a new global financial architecture for which gold will be the core. Now, I talked about this at length in the episode 24, the beginning, well, mostly at least the first 2 sections of that. So he goes on to say, Germany has had enough of the unscrupulous U.S. fascism. No, it's not a fascist regime. It's a Bolshevik regime. There's a key distinction there, right? Bolshevik. Bolshevism is alive and well in the Beltway as well as in Brussels. The European Parliament. And all the bureaucrats there, unelected. They're Bolsheviks. Every single one of them. And there's a difference between fascism and Bolshevism. Okay, so now you can look that up in the history books. The descriptions of those two. Now, Germany has had enough of the unscrupulous U.S. Bolshevik regime, their war, their propaganda, their spying. They've had enough, period. Although Sokka Fal, who I've never heard of before to this particular newsletter, is at times prone to exaggeration and even fabrications, the following story was verified by 2 sources, one from Germany and the other The Voice. The Voice is one of his chief contacts with deep German, and he himself, The Voice, has deep German contacts. Developments are moving rapidly. The following event occurred in late July. The following is the account by Fall. A new report prepared by the Kremlin has been permitted for public view. So this is not secret. It's out in the open. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of German government disclosed that the German Federal Foreign Office contacted Moscow in late July to formally request an accelerated membership course for their joining the BRICS economic community. They plan to leave the European Union, a move certain to cause tremendous geopolitical disruption. The BRICS account for almost 3 billion people and produce a GDP of $16 trillion US dollars, equal to almost 1/5 of the world economy. More importantly, they control an estimated $4 trillion in combined foreign reserves. The emerging market nations are responsible for well over half of global saving. Opposition to the insolvent, corrupt, and debauched US dollar regime is centered upon the BRICS movement. These nations, along with numerous and growing numbers of associate nations, are pursuing an alternative system that conducts trade outside the dollar. They will save outside the US T-bond complex as well. Their success would spell doom for the US dollar, The broken financial system cannot accommodate the world's rising titans, which are these BRICS and Germany. Motivated German action centers upon three major violations of integrity on the part of the US Bolshevik regime. The Germans have the word Bolshevik I put in there. The Germans have had enough of corruption, hypocrisy, and warmongering by the US federal rogue government. The Obama administration ordered the entire European Union to ignore hard evidence provided by Russia relating to the Malaysian Airlines 17 flight shot down over Ukraine. The data proved the event was a deliberate action ordered by Kiev officials with CIA involvement. German intelligence sources have confirmed independently their US counterpart assessment from the CIA that Russia had no involvement in the downing of the commercial aircraft. The German experts actually used the doctored YouTube videos and online tweets to show they were heavily manipulated and instead proved the UK military forces were responsible for the action. Number 2. The German government back in 2011 knew of the Obama administration plot to force a showdown with Russia. In reaction, the Bundesbank, the central bank of Germany, demanded a full repatriation of all Germany's entire US 141 billion gold reserve from the US Federal Reserve where it was stored in New York. Currently, the German government initiated plans quietly to join the BRICS nation in their economic bloc. The anger has been building in Berlin for over 3 years concerning the gold account, betrayal, lies told, and delays handed. The New York Fed had betrayed the German trust to safeguard their gold. Furthermore, an equally risk-filled, the US government plans a fresh new legal attack on the Bundesbank, similar to the attack of BNP Paribas, the largest French bank, on which the US government for violations of so-called sanctions by the US government. This French bank was fined $10 billion. The German government is intensely angry by the US government, NSA, that's National Security Agency, and the CIA spying operating on top German officials. The harsh sentiment boiled over, causing Germany to order the CIA station chief in Berlin to leave the country. So alarmed are the German officials, they have new protocols putting aside their smartphones and portable computers during high-level meetings. These devices can be used to monitor remotely, even when turned off, but if the battery is still connected. They resort to simple typewriters more as well. The nation feels under attack by the United States, an ally turned fascist. The conclusion is that the Germans are motivated to work on alternative roads to the US dollar, as are the French. The outrage over the BNP Paribas fine and heavy pressures over the Mistral warship deal have put France on notice. Their central bank head Neuer acknowledged that the US dollar cannot stand as global reserve any longer. Furthermore, Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff stated last month at the start of the 7th summit of the BRICS nation that the 5 big emerging economies are moving towards a new global architecture that's given the Russian sanction effect on the German economy. Such a financial structure is urgently needed. See, and then he goes on to cite some sources here. See, what does it the what does it mean article, but bear in mind that File has a spotty record for some past dubious stories. One contact with German and Austrian ties verified the report. In addition, The Voice wrote, Sorka File is always good for entertaining reading, since she is often living a bit in a fantasy territory. She is not stupid, just a bit deranged. There's some truth to what she writes about what goes on between Berlin and Moscow. On the website Implode Explode, editor Aaron Crown commented, they have sometimes hysterical approach, but actually their journalism is pretty solid these days. The Voice wrote, the plan is about soon to be triggered to work with Eastern superpowers on the gold standard. They will force heavy bank system losses instead of enduring great economic core damage. Germany will protect its economy as they always have done. Recall, Germany did not allow outsourcing of industry in Asia in the last 3 decades. Unlike the United States, there's not much more to destroy in Ukraine. However, they work hard at it to convert Ukraine into something like the Gaza Strip. The United States is totally clueless about what is brewing in Western Europe as a major concerted defection is in progress behind the scenes. The US is going to be totally isolated and ignored. Okay, so here's another one. That's the first item. Germany is going to leave the European Union, and the European Union, since the German economy is basically been holding the European Union together. Once Germany leaves, the European Union is over. Simply cannot hold. Now, the United States has avidly funded, now this is really significant. The United States has avidly funded ISIS guerrillas in clandestine manner, bringing them into power. So, the CIA, what I call the black hats in the CIA, funded and have armed the ISIS, the so-called caliphate that is running amok and killing hundreds of thousands of people in Iraq and Syria. And they want to establish actually a Muslim worldwide, state, worldwide. They're talking about taking over Italy and Spain. Now, they're funded by the dark hats, what I call the dark hats in the CIA. So, then the same U.S. military, however, it's not the same U.S. military. The U.S. military, there are factions in the U.S. military that oppose what the dark hats in the CIA have been doing. And so that military, what you might call the white hats, initiated a bombing campaign against ISIS, who are funded by the dark hats in the CIA. The fact is that Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and other related organizations functions as the Langley, which is the headquarters of the CIA, Arab Legion. They no longer are secretive Langley ISIS guerrilla terrorist groups on their payroll. Al-Qaeda is in the open a well-funded and well-supplied strategic group operated by Langley officers. They are used to destabilize and to overthrow monarchies in the name of spreading democracy, often with a conceived perception of security tossed in. When these proxy armies begin to endanger oil production or any other product of the world oligarchy, however, they must be eliminated and the threat they pose neutralized. As stated to the Jackass by Cato, U.S. government and U.S. military source, when the Pentagon regulars are in a hot war with Langley mercenaries, then 2 U.S.-based armed forces are at war with each other. Think about that. At that time, the heightened risk of impeachment is brought forth. There's not going to be any impeachment. I mean, what are you talking about? Totally bizarre. Obama just does what he's told. He's just a puppet, that's it. He's a glib, well-spoken airhead, right? And he just does what he's told. He's not going to be impeached. I mean, come on. The U.S. has passed such a point with the airstrikes to protect oil industry assets. See the Activist Post article. In a phrase, Washington opened the gates of hell in Iraq. Next come the Furies, according to David Stockman. Blowback can be, well, it can be nasty. as agreed by the late critic of the American Empire, Chalmers Johnson. Even the acclaimed historical author could not have imagined the depth and degree of blowback coming ferociously towards the US government control rooms. The dubious war on terrorism has come to Langley's front door. Perversely, the Pentagon regulars supplied the Iraqi army with the latest in deadly weapons. You know, the Iraqi army is fighting ISIS, who is supplied by the CIA. The U.S. annexation of Iraq was more an occupation and a horrendous example of failed nation building. It had nothing to do with any kind of nation building. It was just a lot of hot air. The result is the Langley mercenaries, not all Arabs, have engaged the same parties supplied and trained by the Pentagon. The airstrikes are again executed by the Pentagon. We finally have the Pentagon fighting the Langley crowd. To say that the United States is a house divided is a ridiculous understatement. Its military is of two types, one by the U.S. government budget, the other funded by profound illicit narcotic funds, which are laundered through the banks and which keeps the banks alive. You know, the walking dead zombie banks are kept alive by narcotics money, drug money laundering furnished by the military, you know, who control 70% of the heroin traffic into the West from Afghanistan. And that's why the U.S. military is in Afghanistan. And nothing to do with any nation building. What a crock of nonsense. Watch for the infamous green zone of Baghdad to come under ISIS attack. See the Stockman Contra Corner article. The real motive was and always was to wreck Iraq, to prevent its internal development, all the while ravaging its resources for Western exploitation, which has been, you know, the modus operandi of the British government prior to that, prior to the American, you know, once the British government fell on its knees and the British Empire was over and done with, then we have the American Empire, which is now over and done with, and we're going to have the Chinese, Russian, Brazilian, Indian Empire. Because all these people have imperialist ambitions. I mean, there's no question about that. The Langley objectives are well known and well studied to destabilize and to control. The former is a success, that is to prevent internal development all the while ravaging its resources. The latter not at all. They produce mayhem and blowback. Expect Russia and China to clean up the mess and win the spoils in Iraq, which is the gas and the oil. That's what it's all about. Where the U.S. government has spent over $3 trillion in so-called nation building. Now, here's a big one. I mean, this is big. The next one, item number 3. Putin has threatened to bust the U.S. government 9/11 inside job conspiracy with facts, figures, and extensive accounts. The information has been decided to be released after the false flag coup d'etat in Ukraine, which was also a Langley operation, as well as George Soros and his mercenaries that he hires to go in there and, well, I mean, as I said last time, to heist 40 tons of gold and, you know, to basically have what Jim Willey refers to as a scorched earth policy in the Ukraine. The Snowden source is not the only source. On the United States front, the architects and engineers group is totally dismantling the absurd, flimsy official U.S. government story. Now, I already have iterated myself how I knew that that was an inside job right the very day it took place, as I was actually watching the footage put out by, well, in our case, we watched it on CBS that fateful morning. The lid is about to come off, just a matter of time, with decisions to make. The big question is whether Americans perceive the message an issue of being deaf, dumb, and blind. Review the analysis towards the official 9/11 conspiracy created by one of the great freedom-minded investigative journalists on the planet, James Corbett. begin with then Defense Secretary Rumsfeld bringing attention to the missing $2.2 trillion in defense appropriations over a 20-year period announced the day before 9/11. The information is overwhelming on the fraud story centered at the U.S. Army Accounting Office, the explosive story with various types used, and their high story for gold bearer bonds and diamonds. The jackass, which is Jim Willie's nom de plume, finds it fascinating that the majority of Americans still remain ignorant of a basic fact that the World Trade Center housed the largest private bank in the world. The event was a staged bank heist, the biggest in mankind's world history. A breakthrough event might finally be near with the upcoming declassification of 28 pages of the report entitled Joint Inquiry into Intelligence Community Activities Before and After the Terrorist Attacks of September 11, 2001. Furthermore, other salvos of information are very soon to come from behind the Russian fence. Vladimir Putin threatened in May of this year that he had evidence that 9/11 was an inside job and was going to release it after NATO and the US government staged a coup d'etat and false flag attack in the Ukraine. Something big is about to break. The US-European Union Alliance. See the Dollar Vigilante article. After 9/11 hit the scene, the event enabled a fascist dictatorship to take hold of the U.S. government offices. In the following months, a group of engineers made an impression on dispelling the official story. They did a credible job. Their head, however, was removed from Brigham Young University engineering faculty to the shame of the institution. In this place has come a truly massive, far more impressive group called, and you probably can Google these guys, Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, or AE1000. They deal in scientific data, not bullshit, claptrap nonsense. They might be distinct groups, I'm not totally sure. The message by Richard Gage, its founder, is of a major gold heist at the World Trade Center on 9/11. Gage was interviewed on C-SPAN. He did a great job at dismantling the official story and answering the critics. The walls are crumbling down, finally, around the nonsensical, illogical, absurd official story put forth by the criminal accomplices in the United States government. C-SPAN posted the interview on August the 2nd amid some hubbub. See the C-SPAN interview here, YouTube video here, and the Word press article here. As evidence with publicity generated on some verifiable proof of complicity by the U.S. government security agencies, the Wall Street banks, and a key Mideast ally, not the Saudis, one is left to wonder which news networks and which papers will cover the story. Well, they won't. You know, the moribund, soporific media, otherwise known as the Ministry of Truth, after Orwell, they're not going to cover it. Not at all. No, there's not going to be any. It'll have to be just up to the individual to seek out the information as I'm giving it to you and verify it for yourself. And, you know, if anybody who believes anything that comes out of any entity belonging to the federal government or the useless states of America is simply brain dead. I mean, you're not going to believe anything they say. They cannot be trusted. They have no credibility. So why even bother listening to them? Go and dig out the sources that are available on the internet, and there are many of them. You just have to do your homework, otherwise known as doing our due diligence. The full truth might not, the full truth might never come out, at least not officially. But it's not, it's not whether the official story holds water or not. It's whether you can dig out the facts and let the facts speak for themselves and then act accordingly. Right? And this is what the whole, theme of the Mabuku Chronicles is. And I'm here to tell you how to emancipate ourselves from the machinations of the ruling criminal elite who want to establish a Bolshevik totalitarian, world government. That's what they want to do. So you just have to know what's going on, so you can then emancipate ourselves from it. And I've given you the strategy for doing that. You have to go back to the first episodes of the Mabuku Chronicles and just go through every single episode one by one, step by step. And all the practical steps that we can all take to emancipate ourselves from the machinations of these shadows of Mordor, the orcs, that they are inhabiting Washington, the District of Corruption, and Langley, and the Federal Reserve, and the National Health Institute. What a joke. All these bureaucracies are run by orcs, where orcs stands for Organized Crime Syndicates. Alright? That's who they are. And then you better just wake up and smell the bullpucky. Alright, then there's one more item that I want to bring to your attention. We talked about ISIS, Germany, due to the BRICS, 9/11 evidence, Gates, and Ebola. Now, what's brewing there, huh? It has been, Jim Woody mentions in this newsletter, that the Ebola outbreak was caused by Bill Gates Foundation working in concert with a laboratory in Sierra Leone to produce the Ebola virus and let it run amok in West Africa, and it's causing severe damage there. However, my gut feeling is that this thing is going to be let to run amok, at least as far as the headlines go, in the United States of America, because they let people come back here from... I mean, if you wanted to isolate a plague, you don't bring people who have the plague into your country. You don't do that, right? You keep them isolated where they are and try to contain the plague. And Ebola virus is a plague in West Africa. And it's causing an amazing amount of devastation in terms of the economy and people getting killed and this and that. So they let people come into this country. Now, why do they do that? This is what I call a false flag. Another false flag. In other words, they will create enough hysteria and fear around the Ebola virus being in America that they will now cause so much fear around it that they will suggest to people that they take the vaccine. You go down to your local clinic and you take the vaccine against the Ebola virus. And guess what? In that vaccine will be a live Ebola virus. That's my feeling. So don't go to it. Don't take that vaccine. Even if it's mandatory, just avoid it. The best way to avoid it, of course, is to be out of the medical system altogether. So you don't have a medical record. You don't have a doctor. You don't have an HMO. You don't have any of that. You're simply not on the radar screen. And how do you do that? Well, you go back to the first episodes of the Mabuku Chronicles and you just go through them so that you can find out how practically to get out of the system. Jim Sinclair, JS Mindset, he's always telling people to get out of the system, but he's only talking financially. The fact of the matter is, you have to get out of the system medically also. So you don't see a doctor, you don't have a checkup. You don't have a record anywhere. I don't have a record. Medical record? Not at all. Not since I left. I came here, 1979. I haven't seen a doctor. I've been ill. I've had sicknesses, but I know how to take care of them without going to the doctor, using natural healing methods. Alright, so here we are. We have about 10 minutes left. I like to do these about 45 minutes or so. Now, maybe an hour. Now, okay, so I've been talking about events that are taking place that everybody should be cognizant of, and I hope you spread this to all your friends, those of you who subscribe to this or happen to come across it. And as I keep iterating every time, if this is your first time seeing an episode or segment of the Mabuku Chronicles, and I urge you to go back to the beginning, 2011 February, when I started it, and just go through it methodically over the course of the next few months. Just take they're quarter of an hour each, each segment. Each episode is 3 or 4 segments, depending on how long I discuss, what subjects I discuss and how long I discuss them. And you just have to take a quarter of an hour out of your day every day and just work through them and take the notes. Go to my website, buy my book, The End of Medicine, and check out macrobiotic places in your area. There are plenty of people doing macrobiotics all over the United States of America, but they're there, and you can get. And I always tell people, seek out the local people who are doing a macrobiotic practice in their local backyard. So in your local backyard, because that's where you find the sources that are near to you. You've got to talk to people, live people, talk to them. Listening to me or reading it on the web or buying a book is fine, it's so very good, but there's no substitute for getting together with people who are doing a macrobiotic practice, and you can discuss all the manifold benefits and pitfalls that go along with a macrobiotic practice, in studying yin and yang and 5 transformation theory and all those things. It's really important that you get together and talk to people face to face. Facebook doesn't make it. Simply doesn't make it. I have a Facebook page, but as far as having a real serious in-depth discussion, there's only one way to do it, and that is to talk to people who are in front of you. It's the only form of communication that is worth anything at all. So I encourage you to do that. Just go to your local natural food store and put up a bulletin there. Interested in macrobiotics? Anybody doing potlucks or cooking classes or holding talks by teachers and whatnot? Do that in your local backyard. Alright, now we turn again to the major subject of the threefold commonwealth, because all these symptoms that I'm talking about, the symptoms of the 9/11, the Ukraine fiasco, the ISIS thing, the Ebola thing, all this stuff are the symptoms of a diseased social organism. And the whole purpose of the threefold commonwealth is to create a healthy social organism. That's the fundamental purpose of it, so that we have a social culture that fundamentally supports every individual in that culture, no matter what their station in life is, what they do, and where they live. None of this 1%, 90%, inequalities. That's not what it's to do away with that. Totally. And is to bring about a general prosperity for every human being who puts in the effort to work in whatever field they happen to be working in. Now we have the threefold commonwealth. Now, in terms of the time factor, I said the last time that there are The important point to understand about the threefold Commonwealth is not an agenda put together by Steiner or anybody else. Okay, it's not a program or anything of the sort. It is a spiritual impulse which comes from the Archangel Michael, who is the ruling time spirit of our time since 1879 for approximately 350 years therefrom. You know, so whatever that is, 1879, 350 years. Let's call it 1880 to make the math easier. 1880, 350, that's 1930, 2230. So 2229, around there is when his time, you know, his rulership is over, and it goes to the next one, Archangel, who is a Raphael, who is known as the angry God or the hard God, and he's going to be the ruling archangel after Michael. So we need to prepare for that period, even though it's, you know, 300 or 400 years from now. Well, no, it's not that long. You know, it's what, 1879, 1979, 2014, 135, so we've still got 215 years. Okay, and then of course he rules for 350 years after that, and it may well be. And so, although repeated Earth lives take place roughly every 100 years on average, you know, from the time we pass through the gate of death to the time we of our rebirth in our next incarnation, the average time is 100 years, 1,000 years rather, but it may be accelerated, so that we come into our next incarnation during Raphael's rulership as the Time Lord. So, and those are going to be very hard times. I mean, they are because Raphael, the last time he was the ruling archangel, the Time Lord, was during the time when Christ incarnated in the Jesus of Nazareth, and that was a time of tremendous privation and hardship and possession by demons and so forth and so on. And so we can expect that to be similar when Raphael's next incarnation rulership takes place, beginning after Michael's. So the point is that this is a spiritual impulse that is put into everybody's soul, right across the world. And we need to pay attention to it, listening to our inner selves, so to speak, so that we can start to, how should we say, clarify for ourselves what implementing the threefold social commonwealth, the threefold commonwealth, actually means, practically speaking. Because it will come about, there's no question about that, you know. But it's not going to take place overnight, because these impulses are working into the human soul gradually, beginning now with the cultural sphere being the first to be implemented. Now, I did say last time that they're going to be done separately, but although the impulses are separate from one another, they come in from, in the case of the cultural sphere, from the angelic, the realm of the angeloi, and in the case of the governmental sphere, from the realm of the archangels, and in the case of the economic sphere, from the realm of the archai, the time spirits. Those are all playing their impulses into our astral body, into our souls, together. They're already, you know, they're already, so to speak, reaching into us from the future. So all these impulses are coming in, but in terms of practically implementing them, the first one to implement and put into place is the cultural sphere, which, as I have said, is that and all these three spheres, the governmental, the economic, and the cultural sphere, have their own administration with their own regulatory bodies, working independently of one another, even as they cooperate, much like our head, nervous system, central nervous system organization, and our lungs and heart and the rhythm, the circulation of the blood, and the digestive metabolic limb system, they all operate independently of one another, but they cooperate in order to make a healthy, they're supposed to cooperate in the case of a healthy human being, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. So, this is to be the case with the threefold Commonwealth. So the cultural sphere, with its own administration and own regulatory bodies, will administer the cultural sphere, which will be independent of, and of which the government cannot interfere whatsoever, and neither can the economic sphere, other than the economic sphere supports the cultural sphere, because the cultural sphere is education, art, and the sciences, the religious life, spiritual life, and the judiciary. So, and those, they all have to live. So they need to be supported, because the teachers and have to be paid, and the artists according to the works they produce in terms of paintings and poetry and music and literature and so forth and so on. They need to be supported. So the economic sphere will have to do that, as well as we'll have to support the governmental sphere, because the governmental sphere doesn't produce anything either. So all these things are very complex and need to be worked out thoroughly and pragmatically so that they can be implemented in the proper way. And when we are talking about the cultural sphere, that's the one needs to be in place by the end of the 5th post-Atlantean culture, which began in 1413 AD and ends 2,160 years later. So whatever 1413 is plus 2,160, that's by that year, or approximately around that time, the cultural sphere should be fully set up and independently managed and administered and regulated without any government interference. That's the first step. Then the governmental sphere is the next in line, the life of rights and justice, and the whole sole purpose of government is to ensure that the relationships between one human being and another are fair and just. That's what its job is. Government, that's the only job it has, to make sure that there's a level playing field, and of course no centrally planned economy. I mean, we're going to have to decentralize, obviously. So I mean, that's a major thing. I mean, that's huge, to decentralize and not have a state, a capital, a nation's capital. No, that's got to go by the wayside. I mean, that's a historical artifact, and that has to go. So I'm going to discuss these in more detail over the course of time. As if things come up, I'll have to interject because it is called the Mabuhu Chronicle, so I'm supposed to be chronicling, at least to some degree, what's happening in the world around us, so that we pay attention and don't fall asleep at the wheel and pretend that everything is okay, because everything, it's not normal. We're never going to go back to what is normal, and not going to happen. We are being asked to wake up spiritually. I mean, that's really what the task we have in the face of all these events that are taking place, because these events are taking place are fundamentally the events that are happening because people are asleep spiritually. Okay, and being spiritual and religious has nothing to do with going to church at all. So the governmental sphere will have to be implemented in full, independently managed and administered and regulated by the end of the 6th post-Atlantean culture, which ends 2,160 years after the end of the fifth post-Atlantean culture, and then the economic sphere will have to be implemented by the end of the seventh post-Atlantean culture, which is this, what's it called? Well, I'm going to call it the Scandinavian, which ends 2,160 years after the South Slavic culture, which is the sixth post-Atlantean culture. So that's what the task is that is ahead of us. So those of us who understand the significance of threefold social organism need to really start studying the books. And if you go back to past episodes, I iterated which books to read, and I will be doing that again. But I did say, and I did make the remark, that the threefold social organism is inconceivable without a macrobiotic practice being undertaken by everybody in the country. Now, why did I say that? Because I didn't explain that. I explained that now because the meat and potato industry is subsidized by the American taxpayer. If we implement, or shall we say when the threefold social commonwealth is implemented, then the government cannot interfere in the economic sphere. The only thing that can be the arbiter of what is the price of goods, or shall we say commodities, because economy is fundamentally the extraction, distribution, and consumption of commodities. So it's the marketplace that will decide what is practicable as far as what is affordable for people to eat without any subsidies by the U.S. taxpayer. And that will simply price meat out of the pocketbook of pretty much everybody. It's just simply not economically feasible, because it'll be $45 to $50 a pound, whereas grains will still be $2 to $3 a pound, or $5 a pound, depending. Well, inflation is going to take place, there's no question about that. But the point I'm making is, it's not the government that will decide what the price of goods and services are. It's the marketplace that will decide, free of any government interference. Now think about that for a while. All right, so I will continue further with discussions of the threefold commonwealth next time. And as far as when next time is, as I said, these things, when I'm inspired to do them, or when stuff comes up that I think you really need to know, like I think you really need to know what I told you earlier tonight, then I will do it. So probably the next one will be 2 to 3 months from now. And so that'll be what? September, October, November. And so we'll be into Thanksgiving around then. So it'll probably be before Thanksgiving, and it might be sooner depending on whether these things happen. So on that note, I will bid you now. Okay, the final thing to say is the price of silver and gold are not true. They're not real prices. And I've told everybody who's been watching these videos to keep buying silver, and you don't care what the price is until the price gets out of reach, or there's no silver available for you to buy at any price. So, you know, they're keeping the price dirt cheap right now, around $19, $20 an ounce. So keep stacking it. If you don't think you have enough, I think you need probably 1,000 to 2,000 ounces at least in your own personal possession. And you don't, and it's not a get-rich scheme at all. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to protect our standard of living, because the standard of living in the useless states of America is going to plummet precipitously when the dollar loses 50% of its value, at least over the course of the next few months to a couple of years. This is simply inevitable. So that's why you're doing it. You're not doing it to get rich. And hopefully personally, I don't want to get rich because there's a lot of problems with being rich, having to manage that kind of money when you're talking about being rich in the sense of being rich, So, but that's not the purpose. It is not of buying gold and silver. It's an insurance policy, a financial insurance policy. Okay then, so on that note, I'll bid you good night from here in the evening of Carson City, Nevada, where the crickets are chirping, and they have been since the 9th of July. And hope you have a great fall and that you enjoy the wonderful seasonal change in the different colors as fall approaches, and we're into the season of Michael. And I also want to say that I'm going to be putting up, I think, a whole video about the kidneys, because the kidney season starts. I don't know whether I put the whole one up on my YouTube channel, but if I haven't, I will do that over the course of the next week or so. Alright, so good night, good day, good morning, wherever you may be, and thank you very much.